Well, hello guys. I'm glad to be back here again, even though I'm not here. I'm really excited that we can still have our lessons. So today we are kind of continuing on yesterday's lesson. Yesterday we talked about converting uh, percents, decimals, fractions, and ratios, and we kind of talked about the rules um, and how to do it with just moving over decimals or changing our fractions to 100. But what happens if you forget or want to check your answer? Is there another way to do this? Well, yes, there is. So today we're going to talk about how to draw converting our decimals. And we're going to do that on page 11. So please add to your table of contents, drawing converting, page 11. And when you're finished, go ahead and turn to page 11 in your book, label it 11 at the bottom. So page 11, write our date at the top. Today is the 12th. We draw our lines. And let's write our objective, drawing, converting. Okay. Now, like I said, guys, if this makes sense to you, great, use it. If it doesn't, stick with the other way. Like I always tell you in math, there's more than one way to do things. This is just another way, another tool to help you with this skill of converting decimals or converting decimals, percents, and fractions. All right, so let's start off with the fraction 2/8, which of course I can reduce to 1/4. Okay. Now, if we think about our hundreds block, okay, that we looked at yesterday, that good old hundreds block from when you were in elementary school, and we want to divide this into fourths. Okay. I would draw a line down the middle here, and then a line in the middle here. Now I have four equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. So I'm going to draw it here. Okay. Now, when I go to converting this, it doesn't matter whether I convert it to a decimal or a percent or a ratio first. But I'm going to go ahead and do a ratio just because I remember from yesterday that a fraction is one way to write a ratio, right? So it's going to be very easy for me to write it in another way. If I just take out this fraction bar, I can write 1 to 4, my ratio like this, or I can do 1 and then that colon or the two dots and then a 4. Okay, and I'm done with the ratio part. Okay. Now let's try to do the other two. All right, so 1/4. If I change this into my fraction 1/4, I know that one of these pieces would be colored in, one out of the four. So how many blocks are in that little piece? Well, if I know my quarters, I know that it's 25. But if I don't, I can always say, all right, I have four pieces and I'm going to divide it into 100. 4 goes, I draw my lines going down. If we're doing the box method of dividing that we learned a couple weeks ago, 4 does not go into 1, so I move this over, which becomes 10. 4 goes into 10 2 times, which is 8. 2 left over. So then I move the 2 over here, which makes this last part 20. 4 goes into 25 times. So I know that in each of these squares, I have 25 pieces. So this has 25, this has 25, this has 25, and this has 25. And of course, if I add them together, 25, 50, 75, 100. Okay? So if this piece has 25, I know that I have, I know that a decimal is a whole with the decimal separating it from the part, right? I can look at this picture and see very clearly that I do not have a whole piece. So that's a 0. Okay. So how many pieces, how many of the part do I have? Well, we just learned that I have 25 of these little tiny squares. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could draw all 100 squares on here and count 25 out. And so I have 25 out of the 100, or 25 hundredths. And so there's my decimal. Okay, again, trying to change this to a percent. If I wanted to, I could count each one of these individual squares, because remember, each square would be 1%. So I have 25 1%, which I know, of course, is 25%. And so there I've converted my fraction into a ratio, percent, and decimal. Okay, let's try to do one more. This time, let's start with the decimal, 31 hundredths. Okay, and let's look at this as from our 100 block kind of point of view here. Okay, so this is what 31 hundredths would be, right? Here's my block of 10, 20, 30, and then 1. Okay, so that's how much this represents. I have 31 of those little squares, or 3/10 and 1 of the hundredths. Okay, well, if I wanted to change this into a fraction, of course, that means that I have 31. And how much is the total block worth? 100. So I would have 31 out of 100. Okay, let's change that to a percent now. Again, each block is worth 1%. I have 100 blocks, so that's 100%, right? If I had them all. But I don't. I only have 31 of the blocks. And so that would be 31%. Good morning. Good morning. And if I do that as a ratio, remember I look at my fraction, because a fraction is one way to write a ratio. And I just turn that fraction bar to either a colon or the word 2. And so I would have 31 to 100. Okay. All right. So, guys, of course, you're not going to draw a 100 block every single time. Once you get used to doing it this way and kind of picturing what your decimal, fraction, or percent is really saying to you, then you won't have to draw the picture at all. It's just another way to think about how to convert and what the percentages, decimals, and fractions really mean. Okay. Again, you can use it if you want to, or you can use the other way that we talked about yesterday if you want to as well. But I want you to try one more with your group. And of course, we're going to start out kind of easy with 1/2, but I want you to go ahead and draw it, even if you already know how to convert it. Let's start easy so that when the problem gets harder, that you can still do it. So substitute, go ahead and, or I'm sorry, Mr. Ayers, go ahead and pause the video now. Give the students a minute to talk about it and work it out for themselves. Guys, put your heads down when you're finished talking with your shoulder partner, so that Mr. Ayers knows that you're finished. He knows when to start the video again. Okay, Mr. Ayers, now that you've started the video again, the students can either come up and share how they did it, or you can play this explanation. All right, so here's my 100 block, and I'm cutting it in half. So I have 1 out of the 2 pieces. Okay. I know that half of this, if the whole thing equals 100, one side equals 50 and the other side equals 50. So my fraction